Namaskar. My name is Rohit Phalke. I'm a teacher of humanities and the creator of the Puran Project. Before we dive into this topic, let's get some pointers clear right in the beginning. 1. No, there is no sacrificial fire outside where you might find me pouring ghee into it if you have any questions about my attire. 2. I do have a postgraduate diploma in comparative mythology apart from my economics credentials. 3. Mythologists study myths, legends, and stories. Mythology is distinct from theology, which deals with God and the nature of God itself. And lastly, mythologist is not a new term. Its earliest reference has been found to be in 1608. So let me begin with a question. Is there a need for mythologists? Show of hands, please, if you agree. As far as I can see, as many of you are disagreeing, let's try and play a game, okay? I hope that you're all aware of the story of Ramayana. Like, you may have seen it, you may have read it, or you may have heard it. More or less, you know the story of Ramayana. So let's try and play a game. 2 truths and 1 lie. There will be 3 statements shown. You all will indicate by a show of hands which one do you think is a lie based on your knowledge of Ramayana. Statement 1. Kaikeyi was extremely overjoyed when she heard that Ram was announced as a crown prince. Statement 2. Ravan physically grabbed Sita when he abducted her. And statement 3. Lakshman drew a line around their forest residence to protect Sita in the Golden Deer episode. Now, how many of you believe statement 1 is a lie? Show of hands, please. How many of you believe statement 2 is a lie? Show of hands. And how many of you believe statement 3 is the lie? Well, actually, statement 3 is the lie. You can find the evidence for the first instance in the Ayodhya Kand chapter 7. You can find the evidence for the second instance in Aranya Kand chapter 49. However, there is no evidence of the third instance happening in the Valmiki Ramayana, but it might be somewhere in the 300 Ramayanas that A.K. Ramanujan talks about. Now, I did play the same game online as well with quite a big sample, and as you can see, the amount of people who believe that the statement is a lie drops drastically from the first to the last instance. So if you feel shocked by the revelation, don't worry. You're not alone in the boat. So now I think there is a need to rethink the initial question. Is there a need for mythologists? Evidently, there is a need for mythologists. Now, my introduction to mythology spans over multiple contributors, right? From the stories that my grandmother and father used to tell me to the comic strips of Tinkle and Amar Chitra Katha by Uncle Pai. Now, Amar Chitra Katha turned into historical and mythological fiction, and I got introduced to the likes of Ashwin Sanghi, Anand Neelkanthan, Amish Tripathi, and of course, Rick Riordan. Now, so many things from these reading endeavors used to just fly over my head. Why was Prometheus' role so crucial to the last Olympian? Or did Ravan and Vali actually meet? I decided that I should read the sources from where these authors take their inspiration from. I chose to read the Mahabharata because the complexities intrigued me. I got my hands on a copy of Jaya written by Devdatta Pattanaik. To be honest, I was blown over. Like, first time I found that the stories that I had heard, read, seen had so many connections to the Kuru family turmoil. Like stories that should seem age-old to the epic itself. As I started reading more retellings and such stories, I started feeling empowered with knowledge. Like, dude, I know things, okay? I know things. I used these books as my reference points in debates in college, and listeners used to applaud, which consolidated the idea that what I know is the knowledge. However, every retelling I got my hands on used to have some minor tweak to a previously read story, or some new minor story that I had not read before. All these fleeting glances into this bigger picture and the realization of what a retelling or an abridged version means, I realized that I was taking a teensy step rather than what I had thought that I had leaped. I realized that I should read the translation of the critical edition of the original source. Now, getting the set of Mahabharata was really expensive. My parents were apprehensive when I first put forth this idea. So quarrels, bouts of silence, artful convincing, begging from my side eventually turned into a, okay, fine, take it, kind of a permission. Now, little did my parents know at that point that this was going to turn into a lifelong project. See what I did there? This is foreshadowing, setting up for something later, okay? So Kitab Khana is a bookshop in Mumbai. It had a sale, and I got my hands on the set of the critical translations of Mahabharata and the Bhagavata Purana. Now, stepping stones, baby steps, they all lead to success, right? So, of course, I chose to read the Mahabharata. Now, as you can see, it went with absolute ease. But I was like, dude, I know Mahabharata like no one, okay? So, let me give the other smaller set a try. The COVID-19 pandemic became the miraculous occasion for me to start reading. It took me 2 months to just comprehend the writing and translation style. It took me almost 10 months to complete the reading of the Bhagavata Purana. Now, while the philosophical aspects of the Bhagavata Purana are a different ballgame altogether, comprehending the factual aspects like creation, genealogies, stories are a huge task in itself. Now, I thought of mapping the genealogy of the Bhagavata Purana with a visual of creating something like the Marauder's map from Harry Potter. I found out some issues and gaps where the other 17 major Puranic sources came to my rescue. Now, while reading them as a reference point surely bridged certain gaps, but created more where the roads were already permanent, or at least I had assumed them to be. The rescuers trapping the victim furthermore. Sounds paradoxical, right? Well, that is exactly what happened with me, and consequentially, my dad, my mom, and my wife. And then it dawned upon me. We are the living epitome of the blind men and the elephant parable. And surprisingly, we are the sighted descendants of these blind men still using their interpretation of the elephant. The myths that we know, and the myths that we believe, and the myths as told by the sources from where they come from, are far apart in every rubric one may consider. Which brings me to my core question. Why mythologists should be hailed as heroes? Point number 1, argumentum ad populum. Now, this field of mythology is nicely garnished with the fallacy of argumentum ad populum. It means that any statement, any interpretation which is contrary to the popular belief is immediately falsified by claiming it to not hold any truth value. Now, today, if I say that Harry Potter used Avada Kedavra on Voldemort, the entire community of Potterhead would claim this to be falsified, as this nowhere exists in the canon story, right? So let me try and extend this to mythology. So Sita Swayamvar is a pivotal moment in the Ramayana with Ram picking up the bow, trying to tie it, and he breaks it, winning Sita's hand in marriage. However, the critical translation suggests no such evidence. The canon story, Valmiki Ramayana, no evidence of suitors coming in, competing for the bow, and nowhere it exists. Otherwise, on the contrary, it's a rather much simplistic idea of Virya Shulka, which is the hand in marriage paid as a price for the display of valor. And this is in 3 unabridged translations: Hari Prasad Shastri, Manmathanath Dutt, and Bibek Deb Roy. But isn't it interesting that the Harry Potter instance did not make you squirm in your seats, but the Sita Swayamvar did? I want you to be comfortable with this discomfort. It can be, maybe, the first instance in recognizing the subtle influence of the fallacy. Mythologists can help you ponder over whether what you know is the version that you should be knowing. They will help you ponder whether you have fallen victim to this argumentum ad fallacy. My next point is storytellers of mythology. Now, I know that these authors of retellings do have this added element to create a dramatic effect for the retellings. However, this added element, this dramatic effect, takes the core myth further away from its original source. Now, for example, let me walk you through two issues that I noticed in the chapter The Killing of Tadaka, written by Devdutt Patnaik in his book Sita, an illustrated retelling of Ramayana. The chapter states that Sita and her sisters were present at the yajna at Siddha Ashram, while the translation suggests of this not happening at all. A second minor instance suggests that Maricha ran away, while the translation states that Maricha was thrown far off by one of the arrows of Ram himself. Now, by stating this, I do not wish or do not mean to reduce the prowess that Mr. Patnaik has over storytelling when it comes to legends through simple, lucid language and illustrations. But I want you all to pause and reflect. Storytelling is crucial to humanity for passing on information. At some point, we have all been audiences to storytellers of mythology like Mr. Patnaik. We have all been enchanted by this creative prowess that they all have. But the question to be asked is, how authentic are the stories that you know? Point number 3, the sensitive religious climate of Bharat. The Bharatiya society is extremely sensitive to incidences stemming from misinterpretations and reinterpretations of mytho-religious texts. Sati was a practice of the burning of a widow alive on her dead husband's pyre. Now, while the origins of this practice are questionable, the practice claims its validity from mytho-religious texts. Sati, enraged by the insults that her father gave to her husband Shiva, left her mortal body only to have it fall into a sacrificial fire. The character from whose name and personality the practice claims its identity self-immolated for completely different motives and while her husband was alive. Such misinterpretation led to a rampant inhuman ritual that plagued Bharat for centuries, to an extent that people outraged when it was first abolished in British India. Mythologists can provide enough as well as apt mechanisms in such cases, much like Dr. Meenakshi Jain providing the evidence of this misinterpreted validity of sati through religio-legal texts. To use the words of one of my favorite authors and speakers, Advocate J. Sai Deepak, the question to be asked is, what have you read before you made this statement? So I think there is a need for rewriting this statement again. There is a need for authentic mythologists. Now, this is where I thought to take it upon myself to create an authentic portal for mythology, the roots of which stem from that genealogy mapping idea. The Puran Project is an ongoing multi-mythological project which I started 4 years ago with the sole objective of compiling this information that is scattered around sources so that the readers can get the myths and legends much more easily accessible and factually accurate, and they don't find the difficulties that I faced. Now, this is an example of one of the chapters from the book Bharatasya Puran, which is about Vedic mythology, which has been recently published on the Puran Project. Now, while I do strive for authenticity, I do not claim that this project is the only answer. However, it can be a start to a greater journey that we are yet unbeknownst of. The skepticism is growing. The world is growing. Now, in these challenging times, there is a high need for heroes. Understanding the depths of the characters by reading better creates spaces for fruitful discussions. Basing what you know on becoming a victim of argumentum ad populum just creates thriving spaces for argumentative discord. Now, whether these mythological characters, places, and events happened in reality should be a question left to historians, archaeologists, and people who believe. I hope that I have made some sense into this talk. And I hope that mythologists get the rightful place that they deserve in this modern world. And why not start from Bharat so that we can lead as an example for the modern world. Thank you and happy reading.